You know, Pokemon Unite has a few problems. I recognize that I'm bold and controversial in this take, and no one has said this before, but it actually does have a few things that it could do a little bit better. I'm going to talk about one of the biggest ones in this video. These. What are these? Fashion tickets? What? I have 2,500 of them. There's no more fashion. What happened to the fashion? So did it go out of business? I have every piece of clothing. Like, where are the tick? No, it's not this. It's actually something more important. It's these. What are these? Why can't I use it? Like, I've got all the things. I got Talonflame. I got the Crustle that looks like a big building. I got Garchomp as a detective. Like, you got to put more things in here. But no, this actually isn't it either. But please, what happened to this stuff? What I want to talk about is actually bigger, and it affects a lot of the games that you play and a lot of the tournaments inside of Pokemon Unite, and it's something that I have dubbed the Glaceon problem. Ah, that's right. And don't worry, this problem isn't exclusive to Glaceon, and I'm sorry, Glaceon mains, I'm not trying to take this out on you. This Pokemon is just a great example of what Pokemon Unite gets wrong, really wrong, with balancing inside of the game. I talked about this on a recent tier list, and I wanted to make a longer form video about it because I do think the topic is pretty interesting, and it does speak to why some players ask questions like, why does everyone want a nerf to Glaceon? It's not even the best thing in the game. The problem with Pokemon like this, and a lot of the moves that have been coming out in the last year inside of Pokemon Unite and some of the Pokemon kit designs, is that a lot of these Pokemon require very little skill to use. And before you start to go crazy, I actually don't hate that there are lots of Pokemon that are simple to play. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. In fact, I think there's so much value in a Pokemon that is easy to get a lot of value out of. There's just a huge imbalance in the game with some of these Pokemon designs. Mewtwo. What was that? I think I had like a flashback. Something was coming out of me. In general, all of our EVs have this problem to a degree. Glaceon, probably the biggest culprit, but Umbreon's extremely simple to use. You have sure hit moves on Pokemon like Espeon as well as Sylveon, and all of these Pokemon evolve at level 4, get a massively powerful move, and then a Unite move at level 8. In general, I have nothing wrong with the design of these Pokemon. It's just that they are way, way, way overtuned. Let me just give you an example to sort of make it really clear why this is the case. What you're looking at here is Zoroark at level 6 using its combo for Feint Attack. You can see it did 4,258 damage with its full combo. What this requires is you to either dash in with Feint and then move back with your secondary dash move multiple times until you build up the combo and then finally hit with the end of your combo right there. So it requires you to do a few things, get really close to the enemy, and then make sure you can get in for the final blow to actually do some decent damage right there. You can get stunned while this is happening, you can take damage, you're putting yourself in harm's way, and you have to hit this combo to make sure that you do this damage. Zoroark is kind of notoriously one of the more difficult Pokemon in the game to play because it's kind of hard to nail stuff like this. You need practice with it, and you need an enemy team that's not trying to stop you. Now let's take a look at a situation like Ice Shard, Icicle Spear, Glaceon. You charge up your spears very easily, then you hit your opponent with those spears, and you do just about the same amount of damage. 4,154 damage, very, very close to what Zoroark got by using its combo here. And all you had to do was press the A button. You could even be at huge range from your opponent, and you are still doing insane damage against them. Even if you don't happen to hit your opponent with any of the, auto attacks, you're still doing really solid damage against a target that is far away right there, that all you had to do was press your A button, charge up a few shards, and then press your R button to unleash insane damage at ludicrous range. It's so uneven for the amount of effort that you put in. So that's one of the big issues right here. You have a move that takes very little skill. It's not skill intensive, but the output of the move is very, very similar, especially once you get the plus versions of this move, which you get earlier than you would get on another Pokemon because of the leveling. We'll talk about the leveling here in a second, but in general, the amount that you need to put in does not make sense for the amount that you get out. And that's the biggest problem with a lot of the Pokemon that have released recently inside of Pokemon Unite. Interestingly enough, we've had kind of a string of releases that have not exactly followed this, but last year in Pokemon Unite, we had a ton of releases that really followed this trend, and it was very bad for the game. Last year, we saw the release of things like Umbreon, Inteleon, Lapras, Mewtwo, Zacian. All of these things had massive output for a relatively low skill input, which is a big problem, especially when you're comparing them to something very skill intensive. Now, I do have to say that I actually wouldn't mind the idea that Glaceon was good. The problem is Glaceon is better than good. In fact, there are Pokemon that should outscale it near the end of the game, and given the way the game plays and the meta and how valuable every moment inside of a 10-minute match is, they don't really do that at all. And in fact, they don't even do it if you kind of compare them side by side. Let's just talk about a Pokemon like Tyranitar. Glaceon on one hand, or maybe even Gyarados or Tyranitar on the other, have a very different trajectory through this game. Glaceon evolves at level 4, it gets its second move at level 6, and becomes immediately very, very powerful inside the game, getting a Unite move at level 8. Tyranitar, on the other hand, gets its first move at level 5 when it evolves the first time, and then its second move at level 9, its Unite move at the same time. It's really not online and a very useful Pokemon until level 9. Sure, you can brawl a little bit with Tyranitar, but you can't really fight until you're level 9. Meanwhile, a lot of these other Pokemon like Leafeon and Glaceon, Espeon, all of these EVs are online and good for a huge portion of the match that you're not. Now, I know what you're thinking. Once you're Tyranitar, you're so much better than these other Pokemon. But that's the problem. You're really not. Like, Tyranitar's good enough, but you're not that much better than Glaceon, Espeon, any of these Pokemon. I recognize these are different roles, but the point stands. Glaceon is good early, good in the middle of the game, and good in the late game. Tyranitar is kinda good once it evolves. That is a massive, massive issue. I told you I would talk about the early evolutions and early Unite moves here. So we talked a little bit about the early Evos. They evolve and get a great move at level 4. All of the EVs do, which is pretty awesome. I actually, again, like this design choice. They just can't be this powerful given that they get this kind of advantage. I love that they have a strong early game. They also have a strong mid game and a strong late game. Their strong mid game happens super early because they get an earlier Unite move than basically every Pokemon inside the game. There are a few that get them at level 8, but most Pokemon get their Unite move around level 9. So this puts the EVs at another advantage inside the game, and it gives these Pokemon that are already good another great crazy thing that they just get early. And I understand that at some point the developers really wanted these EVs to shine. I get it. They talked about it. They love the idea of 5 little EVs running around the map. I do too. I think it's very cool. I do think it's interesting that in the grand finals for the AOS Cup play-ins in North America, we literally had all 5 EVs on the map at once, 2 on one team and 3 on another. It's just crazy to think about the fact that these Pokemon are so good, so dominant, that you don't want anything as skill intensive because you would rather play point and click things that just work easily. And that really speaks to the balancing problem that I've been talking about. These Pokemon have too much output for how little input they have. And this is really the crux of the problem. You don't need to give them a lot of experience. You don't need to do much inside of fights to get massive value from these Pokemon. I don't think there's anything wrong with having Pokemon that have this playstyle. They just can't be this good. It's unreasonable. Now, would nerfing these Pokemon, and cutting a decent amount of their damage, or however exactly you would do it, to make them more in line with the rest of the roster for their input, would that be a good thing for the game? Yeah. Does it mean these Pokemon are going to suffer win rate wise? Yeah. And I think that's pretty reasonable. You have to understand, let's look at it this way. If at the end of the week, if you gave me $500 and I told you I will give you $1,000 at the end of the week, that sounds like a fair deal, right? I mean, I don't know what I'm doing with this money. Apparently I'm gambling or something like that. Hey, look, I just need $500 right now. Don't give me this money. Now, If I turned to someone next to you and went, you give me $200, I'll give you $1,000 at the end of the week. You'd go, hey, I don't understand. Feels like I'm putting in a lot more and we're both getting the same results. And I'm like, yeah, I like that person. They're cute. That's cute. They're the Eevee of this situation. Do you get it? The input for what you get out doesn't make sense because it's kind of an equal output. The biggest culprit of this, of course, was Mewtwo Y and Mewtwo X. Mewtwo X and Y were very simple Pokemon and their output was absolutely absurd. I actually have high hopes for a living very similar to Panic at the Disco because the recent releases haven't followed this trend, and I think that's great. I'm not expecting every Pokemon to be a complex nightmare to play. I don't want that at all. I do want Pokemon that are simple and fun to use. But if a Pokemon is simple to use and another Pokemon is extremely complex, you would hope that the more complex Pokemon would have a higher output at the end of the game. Something where you could say, yes, it's a lot harder to play Zoroark, and because of that, you're gonna have some rough Zoroark games, but also because of that, when you're really good with this Pokemon, you're gonna outperform other Pokemon that are simple point and click Pokemon, which I think is the biggest issue with all of this. You can't have something so simple also be that good. And it's a trend that Pokemon Unite hopefully is moving away from, but it's definitely something that's here and it's really hard for the game to balance. I would love to know what you think in the comments, but I believe this problem simply could be called the Glaceon problem. In general, if you want to make the game more balanced and you want people to be rewarded for the time that they put in, you need to do something with these fashion tickets. And then at the same time, you also need to make Pokemon that are very easy to use, good, but not so good that they're comparable to Pokemon that take way more effort to get online. It just doesn't work. Tyranitar and Glaceon, they just can't hang out in the same world right now. And a lot of times they don't. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope you like that. I will see you all next time. Nerf. Well, geez, nerf a lot based on this video, huh?